And John, we appreciate that. We'll address that with Colonel West here in just a second. Alan, back to immigration. We had been hearing for the past several weeks that, oh, look at the number of deportations by the Obama administration. Well,
the truth is out.
Yeah, we heard this week that they are counting as deportations at the border apprehensions.
Absolutely. And that, once again, that is part of the deception of this administration. So when you look at those at the border turnabouts, you know, that's not really a deportation. But then, you know, part of the numbers, it sells very good when you put that out there in the media. But JD, if they really were concerned about the whole immigration and immigration reform, in his first 2 years when he was there and he had Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, why didn't they take care of it then?
And the answer is, of course, politics. Rahm Emanuel, who was the Democrat whip in the House, who absolutely ruled those incoming freshmen with an iron fist, said, we are not going to take up immigration reform in any way, shape, fashion, or form because of its enduring unpopularity. And yet again, you get the Washington elites, the Chamber of Commerce, organized labor together now, and both parties, or the establishment in both parties, again trying to force this down our throats.
It is a complete political issue. You're right. I mean, the unions would love to have more, you know, exploding union membership because their membership is waning. And then the Chamber of Commerce wants to have cheaper labor. But who loses out? The American worker. And especially when you look at unemployment in the black community, why would you want to bring in more low-skilled workers?
Well, let me float this idea to you guys, because we referenced the fact that the president of the National Council on La Raza called the president the deporter-in-chief. Do you think this may have been some backroom games so they can get this out there and talk about it, and the president can come out and respond to these concerns and say, hey, we're going to be more humane about this?
Well, I think so. I think that everything, when you look at this administration, it is choreographed, it is staged. I mean, how many times do we continue to see the Americans that are somehow brought in, they're the backdrop with this president making some kind of new announcement. So this is a very well-crafted Orwellian type of administration. So I would not put it behind them. You know, and recently you just had the Congressional Hispanic Caucus that met with the president, and Luis Gutierrez, you know, comes out with this very strong statement. So this is how they prep the battlefield.
Interesting.
Within the Republican leadership in Congress, John Boehner insistent on heading for this. Paul Ryan saying he's going to move forward with this and working with Luis Gutierrez of Illinois, again on these entire issues. What does this do for Paul Ryan nationally? Does it help him or hurt him in the conservative movement?
Well, I think it hurts him without a doubt. You know, like I said, when you look at the workforce participation rate for Americans being at an all-time low for some 40 years, but the biggest thing they have to look at is what does this do for the enthusiasm of the grassroots people to get out for the midterm elections and be those volunteers and be the door knockers. And so you always sit back and wonder, is it going to be possible for the Republicans to somehow steal defeat from the jaws of victory? If they go down this path, that's exactly what's going to happen.
Far from the borders of the United States, a different type of balloting coming this weekend in the Crimea. Now, this situation with the Russian mobilization, the foreign minister's protestations to the contrary, what's happening with the Russian army and what's going on in the Ukraine?
Well, I think he's, you know, kind of borrowed a little Chicago political tactic here. If you're going to have all these Russian soldiers and paramilitary there in Crimea, if you're going to go vote, which direction do you think this vote is going to end up? So all of a sudden, Vladimir Putin is going to say, see, the people in Crimea want us to annex them, and we have done this by a democratic process. Of course, it will be the facade of a democratic process, but it's going to open up the window for Putin to do additional things.
And for the record, as a retired military officer, you and I in a free society engaged in a very different type of campaigning. But in its own perverse way, the presence of the Russian military is compelling campaigning, if you will.
It's very compelling campaigning, and if I'm a native Ukrainian there in the Crimea, I guarantee you that type of intimidation works very well.
Now, let's turn to other issues in the news today. The Malaysian jetliner and all the speculation and the news lurching from one side of the ocean or sea to the other in terms of a search. Your take on what may have transpired?
Well, you know, JD, I'm an expert in jumping out of airplanes, definitely not flying airplanes, but I will tell you this. when I look at some of the facts, and the most important fact is transponders and the recorder don't just turn themselves off. It has to have human interaction. Someone purposefully did that. That is the number one piece of information that leads us to believe that this was not just an accident. What brought that on? So there was some human involvement there. The fact that the military radar was picking it up on a different flight path. So I think that there's some disinformation coming out from Malaysia. I don't know why. Maybe it's a sense of embarrassment. But I think that there was some type of nefarious action that went on there.
Well, we hear so much talk about terrorism, and heretofore terrorism has really focused on asymmetrical warfare. The perverse elegance is in the simplicity.
Yeah.
We want to go blow up things, kill people, terrorize folks. This is taking on the elements of a master thriller. When you think about, well, turning off the transponder, where could the plane have been taken? The conduct of at least one member of that flight crew previously bringing women passengers on another flight on the flight deck, taking pictures, smoking, breaking the rules. This adds up to so many threads of the unknown that it starts to spark these flights of imagination.
Well, it reminds me of the opening scene of the last Batman movie where, the villain Bane gets on the plane, and the whole purpose of him getting on the plane was to get the doctor who knew about how to deal with this nuclear device that they had back in the States. Maybe we need to start looking at what type of cargo, what type of passengers were on that aircraft, because maybe that leads us to understand why that aircraft may not have been crashed, but may have been, apprehended, kidnapped, or what have hijacked, or what have you.
And yet, we're reminded last night with the incident in Philadelphia on the plane bound for Fort Lauderdale, there are always air safety issues.
Yes.
Thankfully, very rarely do we see a mid-air disaster, but that looms undergirding all of this.
Yes, it does. And I can guarantee you that there were a lot of lawyers waiting at Fort Lauderdale Airport when those passengers finally did land.
Well, we're glad you landed safely here and got back with us in studio on America's Forum, Alan. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks,
John. Yep.
All right, much more ahead on the program. Stick around with us. When we come right back, JD will have an exclusive interview with former CIA Director Michael Hayden about everything happening in the Ukraine. We'll talk more about the Senate computers that were hacked as well.
And we want you to use your computer to talk with us during the course of our time together today. You can reach us via Twitter at Newsmax TV, hashtag America's Forum. You can visit us at facebook.com/Newsmax. And you can email us. Our address, connect@newsmaxtv.com. There is much more ahead on this Friday edition of America's Forum, so stay tuned.